good health. Still pretty fair health, but I'm still good looking. And what else would you like to know? Oh, about down Croft, I couldn't get a pass out, so I got out and I served KP, and Juanita never knew that until after I got home that I was ornery. But she's glad I came over to see her.
Yeah.
Then, we sent to camp, not Kilmer, but was sent overseas, landed at Liverpool, and crossed the channel. Only a U.S. ship rode an Italian ship going over, and as those little boats floats in 3 foot of water across the channel, and it was rough. It was right after that big storm. I think it was about 19th of June or something like that, and made it just fine the rest of the way. Lost a lot of boys. I was in the infantry and lost a lot of boys, but the guy asked me one time, "Aren't you afraid of getting hit?" And I said, "No, the SBs can't hit me." And then I cooked in. Well, next was we were assigned to Patton, and I can't think of the name of the little town or country. I think France and Germany. Germans always fighting back and forth. Their flag was red, white, and blue, and then when it got the other way, it was blue, red, and white, or something like that. It changed it. But we want that. That took you into Belgium and well, the Netherlands and so forth. We was on a blackout list there, getting information. Huh?
What's a blackout list?
Well, nobody knew it, but what they told you, and the officers got it. See, passed it on. They were for our side, see.
Oh.
Yeah. So when I got to come home and got into Galesburg and run on, an old fellow used to work for me. He was close to, he's 80 years old. He said, "I'll get a taxi, take you home." And run on to Lawyer Benjamin up town, and he had some guy with him then. He says, "You got a way home, John?" I said, "No, I'm waiting." He says, "You got to meet number 5, Santa Fe, number 5. He said, "Plim, one of the boy from Gander, was coming in and take you home." So I went home and knocked the front door, and she come to the door and went back and never unlocked the door and went to the back door, and it was locked. Back and forth I went. Finally, I said, "By God, you must not want me to come home." And she had presence of mind then to unlock the door. She was so nervous. And we were visiting pretty short. It smelled bacon and eggs, and it was about 4 o'clock in the morning, 5, something like that. Mother Bennett was out there frying eggs and bacon for me. She says, "John needs something to eat." So by that time, Dad went to work about 7, and went down about 6, saw him and Mom. And so that's the life. Wouldn't want to go through it again, but I wouldn't take anything for the experience I've had.
Well, thank you, John.
Saw a lot of pretty German girls, French girls, but I never looked at them.
But the one back home
Just
was
the
the
glance.
Everybody want to buy a bridge?
Wiley?
My name is Wiley Reed. My serial number is 3605-8410, and I was a staff sergeant in the Air Force, and I was 23 years old when they come and got me to go into the service. And I was stationed in the Southwest Pacific, and I was a tail gunner on a B-24. I was inducted into the service in Peoria, and from there we went to Scottsfield, and Scottsfield to Jefferson Barracks. I signed up there to go to mechanic school And they kept putting us off and putting us off, and finally one day, they hung a letter on the bulletin board and said, if you want to go to Las Vegas and be a gunner, you'll be out of here tomorrow. And we were. So we went to Las Vegas, took gunnery school for 5 weeks. Then we were shipped into Tucson, Arizona, where we formed our group. And from there we went to Biggs Field for our first phase training. Then to Denver for our final training. Then we went to Topeka, Kansas and picked up a brand new airplane and flew to Hamilton Field, California, where we painted a beautiful lady on the side and also the name of Shasta. And that meant she has to come back. That was our airplane,
That
Shasta.
meant you went to sleep.
From Hamilton Field, we island hopped over to Australia. We went to, first we hit Honolulu, then Christmas Isle, where there was one tree on the island. Then we were at the Fijis, then we hit New Caledonia, and then we flew into Australia from there. And we were stationed in the northern part of Australia, and when we flew up there, we flew over this, what looked like a 100-foot runway. We flew all around it and kept looking for another place where we thought we could be. And come to find out, that was our airfield where we would be stationed. But it was longer than that when we got down there. And we flew out of there for quite some time. Then we were shipped up to New Guinea for, supposed to be gone 2 days. They were softening up an island, getting ready for landing. So we didn't have no toothbrush, no razors, no clean clothes, no nothing. And we were there 16 days.
Oh, God.
And in New Guinea, it rains every morning and the sun shines every afternoon. So we could take our clothes off at night and set them over in the corner and they'd be standing there when we got up the next morning. Tried to get into them. When we were flying out of Australia, we were only shot up twice. We were lucky. On the first time, as we were coming back from a mission, we all got separated because of the weather, and we were jumped by 12 Jap planes, and we finally got 4 of them, but we had 40-some holes in our airplane, and one bullet came in, hit the navigator's desk where there was a bunch of maps. It caught the maps on fire, bounced on up into the coffee urn, and the coffee came out and put out the fire. And just slightly, maybe 4 or 5 minutes after that, the pilot sitting there with his parachute straps hanging down between his legs, he happened to look down and the parachute straps were gone. They were shot off. That's how close he come to getting it. And then I was in the tail turret, of course, and I was firing down, and something popped in my ear, and I thought, uh-oh. And I was done. I couldn't move my turret, I couldn't move my guns or anything. And these turrets were run with hydraulic fluid, red hydraulic fluid. And that was shooting up into the airplane, and everybody thought that I'd got killed. So radio operator come running back and said, "You all right?" And I said, "Well, I guess so." And he said, "Well, there's blood coming up to the flight deck." And I said, "I'm sorry, but that's not mine." "Maybe you better check somebody else." So we finished up flying in the day after Christmas in 1943, and we headed back for the States in January, and we arrived in San Francisco in February of '45. We were on the Smithsonian, which was a flagship of the Matson line, had been changed into a troop carrier. And we were the only able-bodied men on there, so we pulled guard duty. And we fought to see who would get to be the guards in the kitchen, because they would feed us good. Fried chicken and everything, all the trimmings. But some of us were unlucky and we had to pull guard duty on the top deck, which was loaded with Australian girls who had married American GIs. And they were going back. We could stop all GIs or non-coms, but if they were an officer, they could go on up. We couldn't stop them.
John, did you know any of those? Did you know any of those, Joe?
Did,
Did you know any of those girls?
no, he wasn't in my territory. They wouldn't allow him in there. We were particular who was in our outfit.
About the third day out, the saltwater machine that made pure water out of the ocean, salt water, broke. So we bathed in salt water for a few days until they got that ready. We quit shaving though, because that was pretty rough. About 4 days out of San Francisco, they decided they better clean out the refrigerators, all the food stuff, and we started getting ice cream for breakfast, dinner, and supper. I'm about done. And then they've got the chicken out, and we really ate good those last 3 days. We got back into San Francisco. We stayed there a few days, and then I came home for 21 days, and then went to Miami for rehabilitation, and we stayed in one of those nice big plush hotels down there for 20 days. And from there, I went
Stayed at the
to,
Ponciana? That's where I stayed when I was down there, Ponciana Hotel.
I forgot the name of it
I
now.
stayed with President Madison.
There was a lot of nice ones there.
Yeah, you bet.
Didn't have to make the bed or nothing, that was a nice part.
Yeah.
Then I went to Charleston, South Carolina, and was a gunner instructor there. And from there, I went to Selfridge Field, Michigan, where I was another gunner instructor, and we had French students. And all due respect to the French, but oh boy. We were out on the skeet range one day, a high and the low house, Ralph can remember these, had the little windows in the back where you looked out the window to see. And they got the idea, they put their own buddies in there to pull the trap. So they would take their shotguns and fire at them little square windows at their buddies in these high and low
With
houses.
5 people in there.
Yeah, their own buddies. They were something else. Finally, it came time that I found all my points and I got out of there and was sent down to Chinook Field, got out of the service on October the 25th, 1945. And the first thing I did when I got home was eat.
After all
Good
the
old
ice cream and fried chicken, you...
No, I didn't have fried chicken, I didn't have ice cream.
You had bacon and eggs?
No bacon and eggs.
I did.
I had beefsteak.
These things.
Smothered in pork chops.
Okay, well, thank you, Wiley. Clayton?
Name is Clayton Hurlbut. Winslow's been my hometown all the time. Went to school, graduated in 1940. Went to Western that fall. On December 7th on the 41, we were in Burlington that day. Came out of the theater that afternoon, it was raining. Little newsboy said, well, you better go home and get your raincoat. And he said, no, not let others get a hope, because the newspaper was attacked on Pearl Harbor. Came home, because we weren't old enough to enlist in, but came home, got my parents' permission, and enlisted in. We went down to Peoria. My serial number is 1612-1994. The 1 stands for, signifies that you enlisted, and the 6 refers to your 6th Service Command, in the area where you enlisted in. Went to Camp Grant first. First week up there, that they were asking for volunteers like you, and you. They took us to Chicago. They give us a 10-minute training course on how to use a .30 caliber machine gun. We're loaded on jeeps. We were to go out. They were supposed to be bringing supplies into one of the war plants up there, and they give us orders that if anybody tried to stop our convoy, shoot and ask questions later. That was a bad situation we were put into, as being strictly, weren't even trainees, weren't even rookies, you might say. We were taken into a hotel after serving that day. We were taken into a hotel in Chicago. And I remember other civilians sitting next table were trying to decide how to divide a little print of butter between 2 or 3 rolls. And on our table, they were passing pounds of butter because the Army was furnishing the food. Well, I felt sorry for the guy, so I turned to the table and passed my pound of butter over to him. And the guy said later, said, you know, you could have been court-martialed for giving government property away like that? Well, I said, that would have been in and out pretty fast then, if only 2 weeks in the service. Well, we went from Camp Grant, we went to Camp Hood, Texas, which was basically a tank destroyer tank down there, but in North Hood and South Hood. And for taking the basic training, they finally did get some equipment in there, but for a while, they had mock-up guns, and they had mock-up rifles, and they had signs printed on the side of trucks that were running across the field that this is a tank, and you're supposed to be shooting at a tank. All it was a tank or such as that. Well, they finally got half-tracks. They got other equipment in there to start getting your training. After I finished my basic training, I went into serving the supply, and we had one of our best cooks that we had enlisted in the Army, and he was from Kentucky. But the reason he had joined the Army was he was a bootlegger in Kentucky, and when they broke up his still, it made him mad, and so he enlisted in. But Rogers, any day we'd go out on maneuvers or anything else, we wouldn't be out there 30 minutes, and he'd have his little corner and have a little fire started, and he'd have his little still working up no matter where we were camping out. We also, give an example, being a supply sergeant, the cooks had to come get supplies from us, and he'd say, well, lots of times if we couldn't get in to eat, when he served the food, he said, you'll either get in here when we serve the food or you don't eat. Well, the next week he came in with these cook supplies, but we had already taken and picked up cook supplies and other supplies and said, well, when you get in here and we eat when we can, and you get your supplies, and when we pick up supplies, otherwise you don't get your supplies. So then they decided that the supply for food and such as that was more important than the getting in there to eat when he wanted to. We went from, they transferred us from Camp Hood, Texas, being in supply. They were always also authorized to handle first-class mail. We went into the post office system just before Christmas in Jacksonville, Florida, and the mail was being transferred through the station. A lot of it went clear up to Jacksonville, came back through there, and in Camp Blanding, Florida. And we had, when we were there in the mess hall, a lot of times there was a lot of waste, really was, and some of the divisions or some of the companies where the supply sergeants or the cooks were given a certain amount of money to feed so many men. Well, there would be so much waste that a lot of times they couldn't feed, so this sergeant put up a sign, take what you want, but you eat what you take. Well, about the first day or so, he set up a table right by the doorway, and there, of course, there were a lot of trays that they started leaving out that were partially eaten and such as that food. And he said, I said, you take what you want, but you eat what you take. You sit down there. Well, I can't eat it. I'm full. I don't care. You push it down. So he pushed the food down him for the first few days, and after that, there was no more waste food. We went from Camp Hood. When we were on maneuvers, a lot of the fellows out on maneuvers, like he said about the thing of shaving, and not having a facility to shave or anything else, and they were always complaining about it. One of the things that always cold water, if they did have water to shave. And so one time for a treat, we kind of give them some hot water. What we did, we took a fan belt off a Jeep and ran it without the fan belt on, and got the water hot and drained the water out, and so they had, the whole group had hot water for shaving then. When I finally got out of the service, I came back to Chicago, back to Winsfield, and I had the they let me know, and they said, well, you let me know, and they pulled right up out here by the depot, and me and my duffel bag got off the train and delivered me right home. So I felt real honored to getting right home because I was just getting out of the service.
I guess. Well, thank you, Clayton. Lloyd?
My name is Lloyd Blust. I joined the service on September 25th, 1941. I was a master sergeant. My serial number was 160193668, regular Army.
Now, why do you say regular Army? What?
Well, there was Army United States, and it was United States Army. And one of the differences is, if you was regular Army, you got paid it first. You got paid ahead of everyone else. I made personal payroll one time.
Okay.
But I was sworn in at the post office in Peoria and went to Camp Grant, received my shots and clothing issue. From there I went to Jefferson Barracks and took aptitude test stuff to see whether you get in the Air Corps or not. And from there I went to Curtis Wright Technical Institute of Aeronautics at Glendale, California on detached service. We had civilian cooks, we had girls waiting tables, and when I got through school there, they sent us to San Diego.
Any Hooters?
And what?
Any Hooters?
We went to San Diego to Consolidated Factory School, and we were the first Air Corps guys sent down there, so we stayed at the Hotel San Diego, ate in the coffee shop, rode the city bus out to the factory, and of a morning they would lecture to us for the morning, and then in the afternoon they turned us loose on the assembly line.
Oh.
And that was a lot of fun. Everybody pick out a good-looking girl. That's a part of the airplane they study. From there, I went to Barksdale Field, Louisiana, and they had an engineer school there, so I was put as instructor in the engineer school. And I didn't have any extra duty of any kind. And when the Japanese attacked the Dutch harbor, our outfit was farther advanced in training, so they took part of our outfit and went to Nome, Alaska. They patrolled the Bering Sea. And they left one airplane. I was a corporal and crew chief of the airplane. We went from Barksdale Field to Will Rogers Field, and then from there overseas. I landed overseas a year from the day I joined the service, September 25th, 1942, and went to Adak Island, which is about 1,800 miles off the mainland of Alaska. And we had 90 mechanics in Anchorage, Alaska. We had 2 men to a plane, a crew chief and 1 man. We had no fuel trucks, no generators. We worked with a flashlight in one hand, and we pumped fuel out of the barrels into the airplane. They burnt 200 gallons an hour. And they had drained a lake on Adak Island and put up sea gates to keep the lake from filling up on high tide, and laid down mattings, and that was our runway. We pulled 2 missions a day, and we did, when your airplane was in commission, you didn't quit. You stayed till every airplane was ready to go the next day. So we put in a lot of hours. Our outfit pulled the first raid on the Kuril Islands. We pulled that from Attu Island. We landed B-24s and took off a 4,200-foot fighter strip on Massacre Bay with Bombay tanks. And they taxied up to the base of the mountain, set the brakes, and revved all 4 engines wide open and hoped they didn't miss. Because you run out of runway, just 20-foot drop into the water. We lost our CO, and the planes got shot up pretty bad. Some of them landed in Siberia, some landed at Attu, and a couple of them landed at an emergency strip on Shemi Island. It was quite an experience. I get back to the States January the 4th, 1944. I went to Miami Beach for 6 weeks rest and rehab, and from there I was sent to Charleston, South Carolina. I was a tech sergeant at the time. I had 25 maintenance crews under me. I was a flight chief, and every crew chief I had was a master sergeant. They outranked me. And after VE Day, they disbanded B-24 outfit and brought C-54s in, 4-engine plane. They sent me back to California to Douglas Factory School. And shortly after that, I was promoted to Master Sergeant, and I was discharged at Scott Field the 16th of October, 1945. 4 years and 22 days, I think I had service.